Age of Empires 2 is about empire building, combat, and conquest. You start from humble beginnings, a small village in the Dark Ages. You explore to expand your borders, conduct trade to boost your economy, and research technologies to grow your civilization into a mighty empire. But there are difficulties too. Cunning enemies and rivals that oppose you, powerful castles to destroy, tyrants to bring down. And if you're skillful and a little lucky, you just might build a wonder of the world and create an empire that will stand the test of time. To learn how empires are built, help our first hero, William Wallace, in his fight against his oppressors.
We are without a leader. The dead King of Scotland has no heir. War creeps in from the south, where Edward Longshanks, the avaricious King of England, has returned from successful campaigns to conquer Wales and France. As Longshanks turns his attention to Scotland, the shadow of fear settles across the Highlands. The English have thousands of Welsh longbowmen, hundreds of knights on horseback, and dozens of siege weapons. We Scottish have a rabble of untrained soldiers who do not even know how to march in a straight line. We must act soon if we have any chance of resistance. We need to forge an army by any means necessary. Scotland has soldiers now, if only a few. But if we are to turn back the greed of Edward Longshanks, we will need many more recruits. Much more gold in our coffers. These ancient stones and oaks around us will soon be steeped in the blood of clansmen. An army marches on its stomach, or so the old saying goes. My clansmen have been farming and tending sheep for hundreds of years, but gathering enough food to feed an army is a different matter entirely. Without a strong economy, the meager forces that we've cobbled together will collapse again. Edward Longshanks, for all his disrepute, has shown military tactics in Wales, England, and France to be very effective, if not cruel and ruthless. He's indeed an enemy to be feared. The English sacked the town of Berwick upon Tweed. Would that I could call it a battle, but it was truly more of a massacre. Unless we organize our army, there will be more massacres to follow. I pray we can be ready for Longshanks' coming. In villages throughout the Highlands, there is grim talk of skirmishes between Scotland and England. We lost the city of Dunbar this week. Scottish defenders broke ranks and fled. The English have an army that is larger and better trained. To compete with them, we are going to need new recruits to pick up the spear, sword, or bow. We must remake these shepherds into soldiers. Now that we have militias stationed across the border, the English have slowed their raids. But facing Longshanks' army will be another matter. The wicked English king has yet to bring his famous longbows to bear. Our militias could only get us so far. We are going to need more advanced weapons. Rumors creep in from the south of a giant leads the forces of Scotland, his great sword driving through earth and man and horse alike. If this mythical knight can hold the English advance, it will give us time to develop the arms we need. Even now, our smiths are forging swords and fletchers are making arrows and crossbow bolts. Longshanks has invaded, stormed, and sacked the city of Perth. It's worse. He's captured the fabled Stone of Scone and declared himself King of Scotland. If we cannot bring about a victory in battle soon, then the Scottish armies will be too demoralized to put up any fight at all. If this mythical Scottish giant does exist, I wish he'd get his forces up to Stirling, where we shall next do battle. The time for minor skirmishes is over. We now prepare for war. The villain Longshanks is poised to cross the River Forth and threaten the town of Stirling with a force of men-at-arms, heavy cavalry, and a multitude of archers. Our newly formed army marches southward to establish our own base and attack the English before they can ready their troops. Stirling was our first great victory. Even as we held the coastline, word came in that the Stirling Bridge had been held by a force of Scots led by the mythical knight, of whom so many have spoken. Now, we know his name. Sir William Wallace, the Hammer of the English. Edward Longshanks names Wallace a traitor and a criminal, but Sir William replies that he cannot be a traitor, since he never swore fealty to an English king. With Wallace leading our armies, the men fight with renewed vigor. Perhaps the tide of our misfortunes is about to turn. Our coffers were depleted at the Battle of Stirling, so we need to strengthen our economy once again before pushing south into lands held by the English. We need to construct a market and establish trade routes to the villages of friendly clans. Local legends speak of 3 sacred relics hidden south of Stirling. Acquiring these artifacts for Wallace's army will be a great boost to Scottish morale. With the 3 relics now locked away safely in Scottish churches, men murmur that we are blessed by the heavens. Our army now stands a chance as we prepare for the final clash with the English. Scotland now has archers and knights of our own with which to meet Longshanks. We march south to Falkirk, where we will rendezvous with the army of William Wallace and plan our combined attack upon the English castle. The only way we can hold the boggy lowlands around Falkirk is to build a castle and as many walls as we can construct in a short time. These fortifications will serve to protect our camp as we construct siege weapons with which to assault the English castle. Once the castle is constructed, Wallace himself has sworn to join our forces, and together we will attack Longshanks and his English troops. It looked certain that we would be defeated at Falkirk. Yet, somehow, though outnumbered and outranged by English longbows, we were victorious! The English castle was torn down, and a Scottish one will be built in its place. William Wallace has shown us the path to victory. Although he's but one man, he inspires great deeds in others, and many of the Scottish princes and lords have drawn their swords with his. Wallace's own sword is a 5.5-foot beast, forged, of course, in Scotland. He has sworn not to rest until his sword finds the neck of Edward Longshanks. The struggle will continue, but we have learned the ways of war. Now, it is the English who will know fear.
February 19, Army Camp near Vaucouleurs. This morning I awoke to visions of fire and steel. These nightmares come more often now that I have seen my beloved France eaten away in years of war. I wandered through camp, ignoring the new snowfall, but observing the wounds and weariness of every soldier under my command, observing the desperation in their eyes. It was then that I first saw the girl. She told us that her name was Jeanne. She told us she was but a peasant who did not know how to ride or fight. She told us that she intended to rescue France. The darkness lifted from the men's souls. Her voice rang with conviction, and we drank in her every word. I may have lost my faith, But Jean has not lost hers, and that is enough for me. Jean has asked our ragged band of soldiers to take her to Chinon, where the rightful ruler of France, the Dauphin, hides from his foes. The war-torn land between is infested with enemy marauders, and we will lose many men. Death is by now an old companion, but for Jean, we will face it again. As Jean's footsteps echo down the marbled hall of the chateau, the fat and whispering dupes did naught but stare. The Dauphin himself seemed afraid as she kissed his feet. "My gentle Dauphin," she demanded, "why does England claim what is ours? Why are you not crowned King of France, as is your right?" The courtiers began to murmur. The chamberlain whispered lies into the Dauphin's ear, but the Dauphin pushed the chamberlain away and rose to meet Jean's gaze. She stands only to the shoulder of the shortest man, but all of us must look up to speak to her. I know not what silent conversation passed between the Dauphin and his would-be savior, but it was obvious that His Majesty was in the same thrall as we. March 26th, Chinon. It is one thing for a band of dispirited soldiers to put their trust in a teenage girl. It is entirely another for that girl to be given command of the army of an entire nation. We were filled with pride when we heard the Dauphin's heralds pronounce Jean the Maid as commander of the army of France. So that she may look like a general, the Dauphin presented Jean with a great war horse and a suit of white armor. Jean instructed me to look for an ancient sword buried beneath the altar of a local church. I was skeptical, but not only did the men unearth a rusted blade, but we found that the sword belonged to Charlemagne, grandfather of France. I shall not doubt her word again. Still visible on the hilt was the fleur-de-lis. Jean adopted the fleur-de-lis as her symbol and had it blazoned upon her battle standard. Wherever Jean goes, the standard goes also. It goes with us to Orléans. The city of Orléans is one of the finest in France, but it is under siege by our enemies, England and Burgundy, and is about to fall. This war has dragged on for 100 years with precious few French victories. The people of Orléans need a savior. They are to get Jean of Arc. Jean prophesied that she would be wounded at Orléans. At the height of the battle, an arbalest bolt knocked her from her horse. We could not believe our misfortune. But as we carried Jean away from the carnage, the battle was won. Orléans was free. When we entered the city, the entire population cheered us on from windows, rooftops, and city streets. They fired artillery into the night sky and shouted aloud their nickname for Jean, La Pucelle, the Maid of Orléans. June 14th, Orléans. Our rescue of Orléans was a setback for our enemies, but only a minor one. The British still possess half of France. Tragically, we have cooled our heels for weeks while the Dauphin's advisors debate. Jean became irritated with the delay and reassembled her army. She talks of nothing but her mission to drive the British into the sea. The force of Jean's will is titanic. She has gathered to her banner swearing brigands and knaves and turns them into patriots and heroes. Among them is the man La Hire. A giant clad in plate mail, he drives men on with curses and fists. There will be plenty of British necks for La Hire to break at Patay. Patay is the gateway to the Loire River Valley. The British hold the Loire in a grip of steel, whilst a huge army under Sir John Fastolf devastates the countryside. Jean leads us to Patay to capture the British castles. However, we must avoid Fastolf's army till we are strong enough to face his veterans. After Patay, the myth of British invulnerability was dispelled. Now, our army knows it is possible to win, but only if we are resolute and cunning. The British are a most deadly enemy, and their longbowmen time and again have decimated a charge of French knights. To make matters worse, we now face enemies on both sides. The Dauphin's advisors spend more and more time wrangling, jealous of Jean's influence at court. I pray that Jean can complete her divine mission before the Dauphin's envious advisors betray her. June 25th, Orléans. Dead France is returning to life. Our army swells with new recruits. In olden times, men swore fealty only to their particular lord. Now we fight not for insolent lords and ladies, but for France. For all of us, Jean is France. There is no distinction in our minds. The Dauphin himself has arrived in Orléans. Never have I seen such a celebration. France needs a king, so we must escort the Dauphin to Reims, where he can be properly crowned. Yet, the city of Reims is dangerously menaced by the Anglo-Burgundian army. The cities of Troyes and Chalons also bar the way. Jean commands that we must liberate all three cities before the coronation, and we eagerly seek to fight. As we rode into Reims, a sea of peasants and lords knelt before Jean. Some even knelt to kiss our horses' hoofprints. Cannon thundered, and 1,000 flags danced in the breeze. In the enormous palace, the Dauphin knelt before the Archbishop and rose as King of France. Prayers, anthems, and sermons filled the great chateau. Interspersed among perfumed dukes and ladies were tattered soldiers from our army, many still bearing wounds. Jeanne herself was at the king's side, as was her bedraggled battle standard. Despite the celebration, I know in my heart that this war is far from over. Our fathers and grandfathers died fighting against the English. Jean gives us hope, but I do not know if hope is enough to ensure victory. September 3rd, Reims. France has a king once more. However, as Jean gains influence with the people, jealousy grows within the court. The king's evil advisors now seek to destroy Jean. It's only a matter of time before they succeed in poisoning the king's mind. Jeanne must hurry to fulfill her mission. Paris, the jewel of France, has been under English tyranny for decades, and French patriots trapped within the city are eager to escape. We are now marching on Paris, hoping that the reinforcements we have been promised will arrive in time. Tragedy. As the refugees fled into the chateau of Compiègne, Jeanne was trapped outside. Burgundian soldiers knocked her from her horse and paraded around with their prisoner. None of us can sleep, knowing our precious Jeanne of Arc languishes in a Burgundian prison. The soldiers stare at the uncaring sky, condemning themselves for being unable to save her, for being unable to save France. Paris was the first major defeat ever dealt to our army. Had the king sent the promised reinforcements, we would have captured the city. Now, it is France's darkest hour. July 14, Bordeaux. No Joan of Arc. A rich world made empty and poor. The English put her on trial as a heretic. Jeanne's mind was as sharp as her sword, and she avoided all the cunning verbal traps of her prosecutors. In the end, Jeanne would not renounce her mission. The English found her guilty and burned her at the stake. But her death is not in vain. La Pucelle is the rallying cry as peasant and noblemen alike take arms. My army is an army of the people, and even without the king, we are poised to strike at the English stronghold of Castillon. A victory at Castillon will crush the English pretensions in France forever. Should I die in this battle, I die for the Maid of Orleans. I die as a patriot of France. A century of English toil, blood, and victories was reversed in a little over a year by a teenage girl. The 100 Years' War has ended. Even more importantly, Jeanne's acts reignited a sense of French nationalism. Peasants and nobles alike no longer belong to lords and kings, but to France herself. We will not let Jeanne be forgotten. Already statues and stained glass portraits have been commissioned in hundreds of towns and cities throughout France. Her verdict of guilt was rightfully reversed, and eventually Joan of Arc was beatified as a saint. Sometimes the outcome of history is determined by strength of arms, other times by happenstance. But in 15th century France, history was determined by the will of a young girl, the only person in history to command the armies of an entire nation at the age of 17.
Egypt. A month since I entered the Holy Land. I was in a foreign land, and I was dying. I wandered the cold desert for 4 nights before the horse archers found me. I had abandoned my mount to the vultures, and my armor to the heat of the day. As a knight, I was not much of a threat to them. I thought these men were Turks, come to toy with their prey. But when I could distinguish the riders from the blur of mirage, I saw that they were Saracens, the rulers of the Middle East. I had ridden to the Holy Land with the Crusaders from France and Normandy, so I was by all rights these Saracens' enemy. Yet they gave me water and a spindly horse, and led me back to their leader. And that was how I met Saladin. The paintings in Europe show Saladin as demonic, barbarian. Yet he is more chivalrous than any knight I'd met before, and prefers the palaces of Damascus to slaughtering Normans in the desert. I had not expected hospitality from Saracens. We Normans execute any armed Arab we capture, but Saladin left me free to explore his camp. Perhaps he wants an objective observer to chronicle the prodigious bloodshed ahead. Saladin's army is heading south to Egypt to reinforce Cairo. Egypt is a tempting prize for the Crusaders. She is fabulously wealthy, yet governed by an ineffectual fool. Before my capture, I was en route to join in the Crusaders' assault on Egypt. It is a bitter irony that now I shall view the contest from the enemy camp. So it was that I found myself less than 100 miles from the Dead Sea in the company of my enemies. The Franks are dispersed, and the Egyptian army broken. Saladin has taken his place as governor of the Nile. Any European king would seize this opportunity to eliminate his political enemies. Saladin, however, allowed any Egyptian opposed to his rule to leave the city unharmed. Saladin has set out to win over the population. In Cairo, he built mosques and palaces, universities and hospitals. My own countrymen, the sons of Europe, showed naught but treachery, while the Saracens worked to dignify their civilization. It is a troubling turn of events, and I have difficulty sleeping. The Holy City of Medina, year 15 of my capture. Volumes have I filled with my fatigued writings. Lord Saladin reads them only rarely. He speaks of greater events yet to come. The political boundaries in this endless desert have shifted as a result of 3 crusades. 4 Crusader states now exist in the Holy Land. After the Saracens' victory in Egypt, the Crusader leaders realized that Saladin was worthy of their concern. They were quick to suggest a treaty. I hoped that with peace at last upon us, I would be returned to my own folk. But this peace, so short-lived, is already broken. And it is not Saracen, but Crusader, that has violated his word of honor. Renaud de Chatillon, a wicked French knight, has been raiding Arab territory in defiance of the treaty. He attacks trade caravans, and his pirate ships threaten the Saracen holy cities of Medina and Mecca. Saladin, in his fury, has sworn to kill Renaud with his own hands. Although I am still prisoner, Saladin and his generals dine with me. Over meals we discuss mathematics and astronomy. I never imagined a race of desert folk could be so wise. Baghdad, the Saracen capital, is the most civilized city in the world, with free hospitals, public baths, a postal service, and banks with branches as far away as China. But as we eat, talk inevitably turns to war. Renaud's pirate vessels now rot at the bottom of the Red Sea. His raids have stopped. Renaud has escaped, but I suspect Saladin shall neither forgive nor forget. Galilee, year 20 of my capture. Last night we rode into a sandstorm. The men dared not open their mouths to speak. We clung to the necks of horses or camels while waves of sand rose and fell around us. The Saracens have pursued a large force of Europeans into the desert. The Crusaders carry with them a relic, a piece of the true cross. Capturing this artifact will deal a severe blow to the morale of Saladin's Christian foes. I asked Saladin why we were here, miles from civilization and water. He said, to bring crimson death to the blue-eyed enemy. The huge Crusader army has halted to make it stand beneath the 2 peaks called the Horns of Hattin. At the Horns is only a single pool of water, and Saladin controls it. At night the Saracens ride out and extravagantly pour out vessels of water into the sand, within sight of the thirst-crazed Europeans. It is cruelty worthy of a Crusader. The fighting was fierce. The Crusaders had to conquer or die. Mostly, they died. Saladin has treated his prisoners well, providing them with ice water from the mountains and comfortable tents. For the first time in years, I have been able to speak to fellow countrymen, but I am unsure what to say to these invaders. Not all of the prisoners were treated so royally. Renaud de Chatillon was captured here, and fulfilling his vow, Saladin sliced off Renaud's head with his own scimitar. How ironic that it was only after the Crusaders entered their land that the Saracens were transformed into the people that we set out to destroy. Jerusalem. 20 years have I been with the Saracens. Saladin's target is Jerusalem. The great ancient city is sacred to Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and is the virtual capital of the Holy Land. If there can be a victor in this endless conflict, it will be the army who holds Jerusalem. To complicate matters, Saladin is determined not to harm the city itself. If a single holy shrine is damaged, the populace might well view Saladin not as a liberator, but as yet another conqueror. The last time I entered Jerusalem as a crusading knight, I waded through the blood of victims. This time, not a building was looted, not a townsperson was injured. Saladin set free nearly every prisoner he took. the citizens of Jerusalem proclaimed Saladin as their savior. He offered to free me, but after 20 years in his service, I have decided to see it out to the end. Tiberius, 20.5 years of bloodshed. We are far from the ocean, so the Saracens interpret the smell of salt and commotion of sea birds as signs from heaven. I sit near Saladin's tent, watching the butchery below. Saracen horse archers sweep through yet another unorganized mob of European soldiers. The great Crusader nations have been reduced to puny city-states. Only Tiberias, Tyre, and Ascalon are still in Crusader hands. Nonetheless, these 3 cities are well fortified and could withstand any siege. Saladin has had many victories on the open desert, but the Crusader castles are unparalleled. If he is victorious now, the Holy Land will belong to the Saracens again. A failure could mean decades more of carnage. Once I was amazed at the nobility of the Saracen warriors. Only a few years ago they entered battle as gentlemen, bringing with them treasure chests, wine, singing girls, and collections of doves, nightingales, and parrots. No longer. In reaction to European hostility and fanaticism, the Saracens have steadily become more resolute, more bloodthirsty. Their love of art is replaced by a love for battle. Now, in answer to the crusade, they have adapted their principle of jihad for warfare. The result has been devastating to the Crusaders. The European presence in the Holy Land was finished, or so everyone believed. The city of Acre. Nearly 21 years have I ridden with Saladin. When word of the Saracen victory at Jerusalem reached Europe, another crusade was launched. The kings of the 3 most powerful nations in Europe, England, France, and the Holy Roman Empire, embarked for the Holy Land with hundreds of thousands of troops. Saladin knows that his most dangerous opponent is Richard the Lion-Hearted of England, a brilliant tactician who learned the art of war fighting against his own father. He builds colossal fortresses and fights always from the front lines, the ideal of a romantic warrior. Richard's army has come ashore near Acre. Much of Saladin's army is trapped in the city, while 2 monstrous English trebuchets pound at Acre's walls. If Richard can defeat our army here, then he can walk into Jerusalem unopposed. Saladin knows that this is the climax of his jihad. All the Crusader states have fallen. If the Saracens can hold on to Acre, then the Europeans will be forced to return home. If Acre falls, then the centuries-long nightmare of eternal war, raid and counter-raid begin again. All Saladin's victories will be for nothing. The first year of my freedom. The fighting is over. The fire has gone out of Richard's lust for conquest. The 2 respected adversaries started speaking, finally, of peace. War is not gentle with men's health. Richard fell ill with a fever. Because he respected his enemy, Saladin sent Richard fruit and mountain snow to comfort him. Soon enough, Richard boarded a ship headed back to England. The Third Crusade is over. The final treaty was signed on September 2nd, 1192. By its terms, Jerusalem remains in Saracen hands, but Christian pilgrims are to be allowed to visit all the holy places freely and safely. It seems a fitting compromise to a war that has been fought over religion and land. The war is over, but I do not think I shall ever see Normandy again. I want to see the steel foundries in Damascus, and the gardens of the Caliph in Baghdad. I have never seen the mighty Crac de Chalier, now fallen fortress of the Knights Templar. The Holy Land has many wondrous sights, and I can spend a lifetime here. It is peace in the Holy Land, for the moment. Sadly, in a land so small, home to so many different cultures, birthplace of 3 of the world's great religions, I suspect that blood may one day stain the sand again.
A blue wolf took as his spouse a fallow doe. They settled at the head of the Onan River to raise their offspring, and there were born the Mongols. So begins my life's work, the secret history of the Mongols. I have been selected to compose this epic because great events are about to take place. We are going to leave Mongolia. I have lived always on this frigid, dry, and endless steppe. The tribes here squabble like vultures fighting over the desiccated corpse of a marmot. We fight over limited resources, scarce water, few trees, sparse grass for our herds to graze on. A wise and dangerous man named Temujin means to change all this. He says that if the tribal conflict is to end, the Mongols require but two things. First, we need green pastures for our herds. With more to go around, there will be less competition among the tribes. Second, we are a nation of warriors. We need a common enemy with which to do battle. To meet both these needs, Temujin has come up with the most modest of schemes: to unite the tribes and go to war with anyone who stands in our path. How, we ask him, how can nomadic horsemen in felt tents embark on a campaign of world conquest? Temujin replies that we will fight not as warriors, but as a unified army. We fight not for our glory, but for the glory of Mongolia. And with those words, the name of Temujin has passed almost into obscurity. His name is replaced with a title: Great Khan, Genghis Khan. Nearly all of the Mongol tribes have united under the Great Khan. The chieftains of those tribes reluctant to join were boiled alive. Each day, new faces have taken up the bow. Unfamiliar hands hold the 9 bands of yak hair that has become Genghis's standard. There are more men and horses gathered in the camp than I ever knew existed. Horse archers and lancers, men in leather cuirass and silk armor, all lift their heads upward to the platform from where Genghis speaks. The Great Khan calls himself the punishment of God. Men smile like hungry wolves. It is dawn of the first day of the Mongolian Empire. Winter has come to the steppes. The earth is frozen hard as bone, and the only movement is steam rising from the nostrils of men and horses. Only the promise of battle brings warmth. Nearly all the tribes in Mongolia now answer to Genghis Khan. But with success comes enemies. A man named Kushlak has challenged Genghis's right to rule. Kushlak sows discord among the Karakitai tribe and means to have himself proclaimed as a rival Khan. Genghis cannot allow these transgressions to go unpunished. He needs to set an example. So we ride west to find and slay Kushlak. If the Karakitai shelter him, then their lives are forfeit as well. Genghis Khan knows that there are weapons aside from the lance and bow. He is a master of mental warfare. Just as he has made an example of Kushlak, he makes examples of enemy lands. When first we encounter a new adversary, the Great Khan spares no one. We ride to the closest town, slay every living thing, burn down the city, sow the fields with salt, and make a mountain of enemy skulls. After that, the other towns are quick to send forth their emissaries, eager to placate the ravenous Mongol hordes. Now all of Mongolia is in the grasp of Genghis Khan. Beyond are 2 vast empires, China to the east and Persia to the west. Persia is the sensible next choice of battle, since it separates us from the rich forage pastures in Europe. But first, Genghis Khan has another score to settle. After witnessing the power of our cavalry in action, the Chinese spoke of nothing but peace. They even promised support for our campaign westward. But now that we have turned away from China, they have decided not to deliver the men and arms they promised Genghis. It is time for another demonstration. Persia can wait as the horde wheels east once more, and we prepare to march into China, the largest, most advanced empire in the world. It was a glorious slaughter. For years, visitors to China will be astounded by the mountain of human and horse skeletons that we have erected. The Hordes have gained one huge advantage by this invasion of China: technology. We now possess the knowledge and equipment to allow us to make siege weapons. We will crack open the Persian and European castles to reach the softer parts within. Genghis is pleased with our progress, and with the legacy he leaves behind. His mother once ate wild onions and rodents to keep from starving. But the children and grandchildren of Genghis will eat off plates of Persian gold. Sleep in the saddle, drink the rain. Eat nothing but dried meat, dried milk, and horse blood. Such is the life of a Mongol at war. At night, we are rewarded with fermented yak's milk and the promise of Persian treasures. Driven on by the words of the great Khan, we have crossed miles of the Asian continent at full gallop. Before us lies the vast empire of Persia. The Khwarazm Shah will be given one chance to submit, and then his cities will be pulled down brick by brick. But not all of us head into Persia. Genghis has sent Subutai Ba'atur of the reindeer people north into Russia. The Russian principalities are disorganized, and Genghis hopes that Subutai can break them one by one. Then the borders of Mongolia will cover all of Asia. The Persian army numbered nearly 500,000 men, but was beaten by a Mongol army less than half that size. The governors of outlying cities were executed by pouring molten silver into their eyes and throats. The capital city of Samarkand, which was expected to withstand our siege for a year, fell in 5 days. Separate mountains were made of the skulls of men, women, children, horses, dogs, and cats. We roamed the streets in wonder at the opulence of the Persians, drinking at their fountains and gorging ourselves on sherbet and tropical fruit. For a man born in a tent, it seemed as if Genghis Khan had torn open the gates to heaven itself. Russia and Mesopotamia were now ours to command. The empire now stretched over 7,000 miles from the Pacific Ocean to the Black Sea. We were about to enter Europe when tragedy struck. Old wolves do not die gracefully. Warriors their entire lives, they do not know how to live when they grow old and their fangs fall out. Such it is with Mongols as well. Genghis Khan was now 80 years old. On the night when we knew that our glorious conquest was about to end, Genghis summoned his sons to his tent. They found their father shivering before a fire, delirious with pain. "My descendants will wear gold," he said. "They will eat the finest meats and ride the finest horses, and forget to whom they owe it all. A deed is not glorious until it is finished." And he refused to die until Ogatai, his third son, promised to continue the war. Ogatai emerged from the tent, carrying his father's bow, and declared, "This storm is not yet finished. I still hear the sound of lightning, and it strikes in Poland." Church bells rang in Europe when they saw our horde pouring out of the mountains. The armies of Bohemia and Germany hastened to Poland's defense. To them, our army might have been from the underworld itself, still commanded by the shade of the Great Khan. European knights fight as individuals, but Mongols fight as part of a united army. Laden down with armor, the Polish and Germans could not catch our quick-footed horses. Time and again we fired flaming arrows at them, then retreated out of range. When the enemy cavalry pursued, we would lead them into an ambush. The ambush was always announced by the Nakara, a huge drum carried into battle on a camel. 100 times has the Nakara sounded on this day. We were ordered to cut off an ear for every victim. 9 sacks of ears were sent back to Ogatai Khan. Only one enemy stands in our way. France and the nations beyond are beaten from decades of crusades. If we break Eastern Europe, then it is likely that all of Western Europe will surrender. But to break the East, we must defeat Hungary. Hungary possesses the most formidable cavalry in all of Europe. They have not only the strength of European armor, but their horses are cousins to our own, having drifted in from across the Russian steppes. The Sazo River that separates us from the army of Hungary is frozen, so we will be unable to deploy boats. Instead, the battle will be won or lost over who controls the bridge. Subotai is coming with reinforcements. If we can survive the charge of Hungarian knights until Subotai arrives, then we can hope to take the bridge. Much rests on this simple bridge. If we capture the Sajo crossing, we capture Hungary. If Hungary falls, so falls Europe. With Europe and Asia under Mongolian command, our conquest of the world will be complete and final. Nothing stands between us and the Atlantic Ocean. The Mongol Empire comprises 2 whole continents. Europe and Asia belong to the hordes. Every place we entered has changed forever with our passing. Russia, once filled with quarreling city-states, much like ancient Mongolia, will forever be melded into a single gigantic nation. Genghis Khan forged the largest empire ever created in the life of one man. His body was carried back to the River Onan, where the legendary Blue Wolf and Fallow Doe once lived. He was buried in the ground, and 1,000 horsemen rode over the site to disguise it. Genghis Khan's final resting place was devoured by the steppes. My people cherish the legend that their great ruler will one day return to lead his horsemen to another bloody victory.
So, you have come to hear the tale of Frederick Barbarossa. Better order us another round. Maybe 3. You see, it is a great tale. But then again, everything about the man was great. Barbarossa was a man of great appetites, great ambitions, and a great red beard. But the question you want to know is, was that enough? Is the will of one man enough to forge an empire? For there was no Holy Roman Empire at that time, only a gaggle of quarreling city-states. These dubiously loyal princedoms were more interested in a loose confederation than a unified empire. But Barbarossa, he believed that he was the emperor by will of God, and he intended to bring the Holy Roman Empire back to its former glory. If that meant crushing all of the German princes, well, so be it. They have called Barbarossa the scourge of Europe, but he was as skilled a diplomat as he was a warrior. He united Germany with more than just a sword. He established a set of legal codes known as the Land Pieces. He helped the hungry by fixing an official price for grain after every harvest. The provinces of Germany quickly became the wealthiest and most powerful in Europe. The Holy Roman Empire was so successful, in fact, that it quickly overgrew its boundaries. The empire was in full bloom, and her population was rapidly expanding. The Germans felled forests, drained marshlands, and reclaimed land from the sea itself. But there was still not enough space. Bringing the vastness of Poland into the empire would ease the pressure on the empire's borders. To deal with Poland, Barbarossa called up one of his mightiest vassals, Henry the Lion. Henry was a powerful prince of Saxony, and his decadent palaces outshone the emperor's own. While he swore fealty to Barbarossa, some questioned whether Henry the Lion did not want the empire for his own. By ordering Henry the Lion to aid in the subjugation of Poland, Barbarossa meant to test his oath of allegiance once and for all. Henry expected to be drawn and quartered, the usual fate of traitors in those times. But Barbarossa recognized the potential for a strong ally and officially forgave him, provided that Henry the Lion would swear to support Barbarossa from now on. Amazingly, Henry agreed. Germany was unified, and Henry the Lion was pacified. But the Holy Roman Empire was not complete. Harkening back to Charlemagne, the empire claimed ownership of Italy, and especially Rome. In Rome, the Pope firmly believed that it was the Church, not the Emperor, who was the ultimate authority for the empire. Barbarossa could not convince the Pope to see things his way, so he appointed his own Pope. This too was not enough, for Pope and anti-Pope promptly excommunicated each other. In the end, Barbarossa had to resort again to politics at the point of a lance. If the Pope would not listen to reason, then perhaps he would concede with 2,000 German knights pouring down the Italian peninsula. The greatest of the northern cities, the virtual capital of Lombardy, was Milan. The lords of Milan were as proud as they were belligerent. Barbarossa was determined to raze Milan to the ground as a warning to all the Italian city-states, and particularly the Pope in Rome. The message was clear. He, Frederick Barbarossa, was the one and true Holy Roman Emperor. Barbarossa was not kind to the Milanese. In response to one attempt at negotiations during the siege, he sent 6 Italians marching back to the city. 5 had been blinded, but the 6th only had his nose cut off, so that he could lead the other 5. Northern Italy had been mercilessly conquered and placed under imperial governance, but Italy would not submit. If anything, the destruction of Milan made the Italian cities even more incensed at their would-be emperor. As long as Barbarossa's knights were present, peace endured. But the emperor could not be everywhere at once. Whenever he went to Italy, Germany would flare up, and when Barbarossa returned to Germany, the Italians began plotting again. Milan had fallen, but the remainder of the Italian cities joined together in a confederation known as the Lombard League, for the purpose of defeating Barbarossa. If Barbarossa intended to make Italy part of the Holy Roman Empire, he would have to conquer the Lombard League city by city. But Barbarossa still had a secret weapon: Henry the Lion and his seasoned troops. Henry the Lion was immediately banished to England. Separated from his wealth and army, there was little more he could do to plague Barbarossa. After 6 campaigns down to Italy, Barbarossa was weary of crossing the Alps. The fighting ended with the signing of the Treaty of Constance, which said effectively that the Emperor and the Pope were equals. It was a tenuous peace, and one that seemed unlikely to endure, when suddenly the Pope died. The new Pope was less interested in squabbling with the Emperor than he was in events down south. You see, the Europeans were being driven out of the Holy Land. It was time for another crusade. The Holy Roman Empire was complete, and for the moment, both Germany and Italy swore fealty to Barbarossa. Alas, the peace was not to endure. The Crusader states in Palestine were crumbling. A Saracen king named Saladin had evicted virtually every crusader from their castle. The Pope called for a new crusade before the Holy Land became Saracen once again. Remarkably, Barbarossa agreed to undertake this new crusade for the Pope he had fought so hard against. King Philip of France and England's Richard the Lionhearted had already boarded ships bound for the Middle East. But Barbarossa's army was the largest by far, and there wasn't a fleet in Europe that could transport it. The emperor would have to march overland to Constantinople and through the land of the Turks to reach the rendezvous in Jerusalem. Constantinople was the capital of the Byzantine Empire and one of the most glorious cities on the globe. Barbarossa's army would be able to rest and resupply in Byzantium before it began the Great March. Barbarossa's weary army had marched for hundreds of miles through the cracked mountains in the heat of July. So when it stumbled upon the Goksu River, the men were astonished and grateful. Barbarossa himself could not resist plunging into the cold water without even pausing to remove his armor. To the disbelief of the surviving troops, Barbarossa drowned. Some said the emperor could not swim in his plate armor. Others believed that his 67-year-old heart had finally given out. Regardless of the exact cause of death, Barbarossa's crusade ended there on June 10th, 1190. The Holy Roman Emperor was gone. Barbarossa's soldiers were devastated. Several knights committed suicide. Others converted and joined the Saracens, so convinced were they that God himself had deserted them. However, a handful of knights were not yet willing to board a ship bound for Europe. The body of mighty Barbarossa was fished out of the river, pickled in vinegar and sealed in a barrel. The army of the Holy Roman Empire would not be joining in the crusade. Yet there was still a chance for a small victory. The surviving knights vowed to take Barbarossa's body on to Jerusalem. Even in death, the emperor would keep his promise. There is a legend concerning every great king, from Arthur on through Barbarossa, that says the king will return someday when his country needs him. Myths and legends about the sleeping emperor were passed down in German folk tales. The Holy Roman Empire did not endure. She fell back into a patchwork of tiny nations. Some would say Barbarossa's rule was a failure. But is it not a greater testament to the man that it was the force of his will alone that held the empire together? And what of Henry the Lion? With Barbarossa gone, there was nothing stopping him from returning to the Holy Roman Empire. But I am an old man now. What harm could I possibly do?